There are many benefits to reusing a singular location across multiple entries of a long-running series of video games like the Kamurocho district in the Yakuza series. The developers of the games have been pretty open about how reusing things from entry to entry helps them create each release efficiently. This also has a unique effect on players on the other side of the equation as well, with calling this virtual pastiche of real-life's Kabukicho district a second home. Some even take the time to visit Kabukicho when visiting Japan to see otherwise unremarkable streets and stores in person. Yakuza games can be relatively short experiences if one chooses to just stick to the main story, but there are dozens of side activities throughout the series that can have a player spending hundreds of hours in Kamurocho, acquainting themselves with a running lineage of goofy side characters and being entertained by things like karaoke or mini 4WD racing. This small video game map becomes host to memories and becomes more than just a few virtual streets in a video game. I've been playing Yakuza games since late 2012. I picked up Yakuza 4 for cheap from a Sam's Club at one of the lowest points in my life. I wasn't seeing much point in anything, so I spent money I shouldn't have to get it, but nothing was making any sense to me anyway, so I figured, why not blow it? It kickstarted the kind of relationship with the piece of media that I'm not sure everyone can relate to entirely, but I am at least sure that for those who can relate, my experience is at least broadly familiar sounding. I got home, booted the game up later on, and slowly fell under its spell. I didn't grow up with games that focused on presenting accurate portrayals of cities. Everything was very video game-y, so to just walk around a place in a country I'd always wanted to visit was captivating. It was so unique to me to be able to walk into a convenience store in-game, look at the shelves, examine covers of actual magazines, and then buy a sandwich and a beer and walk out. That, coupled with the moody, rainy atmosphere and Akiyama's suave personality, won me over pretty quickly. I had something to look forward to again each day. I wanted to see what happened next. I wanted to poke around the city and find more funny side stories. I wanted to hear the battle themes again. I wanted to look for locker keys in weird spots. I smiled, I laughed, I cried at the game's stupid heartstring tugging in the main plot. I just wanted to spend more time in Kamurocho. Over the last couple of years, I've been constantly returning to thinking about the relationship between the player and a video game through my own experiences. When you spend a lot of time in hardcore enthusiast spaces and bear witness to a continual onslaught of news, updates, layoffs, hype cycles, etc., it gets very easy to get lost in the noise and the business of the gaming industry, and then couple that to the participation in the hobby itself. I do think I did that without realizing it, and it made me lose some appreciation for what I was playing along the way. Games became something to finish to then alchemize into an opinion that can be shared, something to be taken in and spat back out as a funny post or a short or video essay or podcast topic. It becomes the lens to engage in the medium with. And this is no knock on any of that. It was just a couple years ago where I underwent a pretty big life change. It wasn't the same situation as when I first played Yakuza 4, but it had me in a similar spot of wondering who I was, what I was doing, what things meant or didn't mean or should or shouldn't. Just a question of why that I spent months after trying to find an answer for. I'd just been finishing up Yakuza 8's trophy list around that time, and it was a moment of realizing how these games had been around for me through 12 entire years up to that point, now 14. And there was some discussion about the second home aspect of Kamurocho for devoted fans, but I really started to think about what that meant for me, as it was something I resonated with on a surface level. I wanted to understand that more. And turning even more to Yakuza 8 at that time showed me that these games had unknowingly been very comfortable crutches for me during times that I was struggling. I don't mean crutches in a bad way, just that without being consciously aware of it, popping a Yakuza game in when I was avoiding something within myself or an external situation was just something I'd do. Going for the completion list or trophies I hadn't gotten yet was just a valuable escape. It gave me more time to be in Kamurocho or whatever other cities each game had. Another facet to what I began thinking about was thanks to how Yakuza 8 handles the idea of Kiryu's legacy. The game finally takes some time to sit him as a character down and reflect on the lives he has positively affected along his path. This felt rewarding, as each entry seems to just truck right along without giving Kiryu much space to reminisce. Probably a good idea ultimately, but as a fan, I still wanted it to happen. As a player, this unraveled to me how much of my life has gone by since first getting Yakuza 4. I don't really recognize or remember much of that period in 2012. I can't even put myself back in my shoes back then, as it just feels like a completely separate human being. Different job, different friends, different mindset, different beliefs. I don't know him anymore. But when I go back to Yakuza 4, some of it comes back to me. That snapshot in time of that specific instance of Kamurocho, some of those specific story beats, some of those specific quirks of the street layouts, these things do kind of help remind me a little bit of who I was back then through these memories, even if it's largely intangible. This of course applies similarly for other entries that are aging as well now, like Yakuza 6 and Yakuza 0, that are on their way to experiencing decade anniversaries, if not already. When I play them, parts of who I was faintly come back to my memory. It was fascinating to me to realize this happened, as it's a very similar feeling I get from another interest of mine. Something I like doing is visiting dying shopping malls in my part of the country. I've had an interest in this for about a decade or so now. I just enjoyed the eerie feeling of being somewhere that used to house so many people. I liked taking photos to help me remember what I felt when I was there. Memories of these places also became tied to specific people as well. Some of these malls were introduced to me by girlfriends who lived nearby, and some I took local friends to so that they could appreciate them with me. Things like that. Some of these people I just don't talk to anymore. Sometimes it was my fault, sometimes it was theirs, and sometimes there was no fault at all, and it was just life being life. Over the last few years, these places finally started getting demolished. A place like Cincinnati Mills in Ohio, for example, made absolutely no sense financially. A huge shopping center with hardly anything to do within. There was an awesome arcade called Arcade Legacy. There was a gym that people went to. A Kohl's was there, surprisingly, but it had the mall entrance locked off. A robotics club took root in there at some point, so sometimes when you'd go through, a local school would just have students driving their BattleBot things around in the main hallway. Neat stuff, but the place just bled money. I didn't even see a single security guard there for years until the closure was announced. There were times I'd visit where literally only one other person was walking around. It was scary. It felt dangerous. The lights were dim. The ceiling was leaking. It sometimes smelled funny. The aesthetics were bizarre. The tile underneath my feet cracked and echoed up on the second floor. It was one of my favorite places to be ever. It's entirely gone now. I can only go there through my own photographs, my increasingly hazy memory, and through other people's photos and videos online. It was terribly bittersweet to keep seeing pictures of it as demolition happened. Incredible shots, but always a reminder that that part of me is gone. I can't go back there and engulf myself in that melancholic nostalgia of more vividly remembering good times with those people that I just didn't get to carry on with me in my life so far. Like picking at a scab you know you should leave alone, but what harm could one more time do, right? Well, it's healed over, and now all that's left is a mark. I can try to pick at it again, but it just won't do. Kamurocho slowly began to represent a similar thing for me. Like some locations remained from game to game, like the Poppo on Tenkaichi Street. Others ebb and flow, like the Don Quixote turning into a police station by Yakuza 7 for some reason. Places come and go, and the ordinary that blends into the background suddenly becomes nostalgic once it's gone. I'd then think about past events in prior Yakuza games as each new one came along. I'd walk Kiryu by where the inciting incident of the first game took place and wonder what was going through his mind. Did he think of Nishiki? Did he ever come by here at night just to feel a connection to him again? Yakuza 8 let Kiryu party up with consistent characters, which just gave me a new way to think about these questions too. Would Kiryu mention any of that to Ichiban as they went by, or would he just keep it to himself? Would Ichiban mention growing up in Shangri-La just for Kiryu to think of the time Majima drove a truck into it? Do they light up a cigarette and wonder when it'll finally get demolished like Cincinnati Mills did? Or do they just keep these things to themselves and ruminate, if they even ruminate at all? Well, the answer is no, they don't think about these things. I, as the player, think about them thinking about these things because I do these things. I drive by places that used to have meaning to me just to once more feel connected to things I'm severed from. I keep things that weigh on me inside as I just happen to go past familiar haunts with new people. I alone reinfect myself with these wounds because I just haven't quite settled some of these things within myself once and for all. Perhaps I'll never be able to. That's okay. Nostalgia can blind, but I know what I'm getting into each time. That's what I mean when I say I've been thinking about the player and game relationship. At a point, I've unconsciously projected a fair bit of myself onto some of these characters and the district within. Kamurocho is a virtual city based on an actual place. When it's crafted each time by a rotating team of game developers, they don't know about anything I bring to the experience. It isn't real to them, they have no concept of it. But to me, it's everything. And God forbid, if I ever wind up in the actual Kabukicho, it's probably going to be a whirlwind of emotions. Excited to finally see it, surreal to physically step through a place I could navigate without needing a map, and then, I'm sure, gradually some of those phantom memories of mine will bubble to the surface through no fault of the actual city district itself. These residual moments from my life that, in a way, tainted the memories of the actual game that I played, kind of a symbiotic relationship. They're just streets. People live ordinary lives there day in and day out, but it will unwittingly represent so much more to me. Each game is so tied to a specific point in my life. Who I was during them, who I knew during them, what I believed in as I played them. There's a lot of baggage there. I've become an entirely different person than when I began playing them, and God forbid if they're still making new entries another 14 years from now, I'll be an entirely different human by then, I'm sure. I'll look back on these 2 years I thought about these things and potentially not even be able to connect with who I am right now. One thing that won't change about me, for sure though, is how I'll turn to this series to try to reconnect again. I'll boot into Yakuza 8 someday, see its incarnation of Kamurocho and Honolulu, and just for a bit, I'll be able to lightly feel into this version of me again. That double-edged nostalgia, yearning for a reality that isn't quite there anymore, but is just accessible enough through the comfort of Kamurocho. Thank you to my patrons, Adrian, Buckles Chucklo, Cooking Mama, Daniel, Goldstorm07, Harry, Hero, James Boss, Jeet, Common CJ, Patrick, Professor Jash, Svendeliga, and That Trav Guy, and an extra special thanks to Alex and the Crazy Even, both of whom actually went to Cincinnati Mills with me at separate points. Thank you.